We're going to kick things off right away with the big one, the Grade 1 Travers 3-year-olds. Mile and a quarter on the main track up at the spot. A field of 10 signed on. No Justify. The Triple Crown winner has been retired, but you had a pretty competitive field signed on. You had Good Magic, who ultimately went as the 7-5 favorite at post time. He's one of a couple in here for Chad Brown. He also had Gronkowski, who ended up being the second choice at odds of 3-1. A little bit of an interestingly run race, and also a little bit of just an interesting day all around up at the spot. We'll dive into that as a whole after we go over this race. And first things first, let's take a look at the stretch run.
And it's Catholic Boy. Catholic Boy has taken the lead on the outside. Mendelssohn is full out toward the rail. It's 5 lengths back to Bravazzo, who's now third. Then Vino Rosso and King Zachary on the outside. They're coming down to the 16th pole. Catholic Boy is pulling away. He's so impressive today, the others didn't even have a prayer. Catholic Boy rolls in the run. Happy Travers.
Catholic Boy gets the job done for Jonathan Thomas and Javier Castellano at odds of 7-1 over Mendelssohn for Aiden O'Brien at odds of 13-1 and Bravazzo for the coach Wayne Lucas. Rounds out your trifecta at odds of 10-1. If you played the try, coming back for 50 cents, $744 and a little bit of coins. A little bit of coins, 25 cents. Let's take a look at Catholic Boy a little bit. 6 of 9 lifetime, 7 times in the exacta, $1.8 million in career earnings, owned by LaPenta, Madicket Stables LLC, Sienna Farm LLC, and Twin Creeks Racing. Trained by Jonathan Thomas. Bred by Fred W. Hertrich III and John D. Fielding in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Javier Castellano for a record 6th victory in the Travers Stakes. And you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. This horse is by More Than Ready, out of a Bernardini mare named Song of Bernadette. 104 Beyer speed figure for Catholic Boy, winning this year's Travers. 118 time form U.S. rating. So again, I've brought it up in the past. You want to use a very rough comparison, about 20-point difference. And that doesn't really match there when you look at it. I mean, if you take 20 off of the time form U.S. rating, you're only looking at about a 98 as opposed to a 104 Beyer that they have assigned for him. So a little bit of room for sort of discerning what you think. You're ultimately the handicapper. You need to decide if you think this is an accurate number or not. Mendelssohn, a 99 Beyer, and a 115 time form U.S. rating. Bravazzo, a 97 Beyer, a 112 time form U.S. rating, and King Zachary, a 95 Beyer, and a 110 time form U.S. rating. When you look at Catholic Boy, he comes home, gets his final quarter in 25.63, as opposed to Mendelssohn, who comes home in 26.33. You look at the third and fourth place finishers, final quarter miles of 25.45 and 25.33. You would expect that because they were coming from the back of the pack, and at face value, usually the horses coming from the back are going to do their best running at the end of the race. When you look at it compared to Catholic Boy, though, who was up there prompting the pace throughout, I think it just makes Catholic Boy's effort that much more impressive. You listen to Jonathan Thomas, it's a very interesting sort of plan that they have mapped out for him to get to the Breeders' Cup Classic. It sounds like he's likely, I shouldn't even say likely, possible, but if all goes as planned, it sounds like this is what the plan's going to be. The Hill Prince against 3-year-olds on turf at Belmont Park, that would be on October the 6th. Mile and an eighth as opposed to the Jockey Club Gold Cup. That's still a possibility, though, although Thomas has made it clear the notion or the thought of going up against Diversify at this point right now, not necessarily high on their list. So, and look, the turf to dirt move has worked successfully for this horse, very clearly. I had said in the preview edition that I was not totally convinced that Catholic Boy was not better on dirt than turf, although all of his major success had come on turf. I'm even more firmly in that camp now. I think he is a better dirt horse than turf horse. Doesn't mean he cannot win on either surface. I think this is an instance where you just have a very, very talented horse that can do a little bit of everything. Distance isn't a problem for him. He has some nice tactical speed. This is the perfect trip. I could not have drawn it up any better than the way that it played out. Now, is he good enough to take on his elders? Right now, he's a little bit slow. But there's a scenario where, again, this is that time of year where I think you get that, generally, you get that big bump up for the 3-year-olds when they finally are forced to take on older horses for the most part. There's a few 3-year-old restricted races still left. This is that time of year when they can take that step forward. So can he improve from a 104 to a high sort of 108, 109, or a low 110. Yeah, it's possible. I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibilities. I think it's also heartening if you're a fan of Catholic Boy to know that the Breeders' Cup Classic's at Churchill Downs this year, and so many people, whether you believe it or not, whether it's urban legend or what, that the main track at Churchill it plays a little bit kinder to turf horses as opposed to some of these other main tracks. Let's just use Santa Anita as an example. So clearly, again, Catholic Boy, I think he's just a really talented horse. I think he can do a little bit of everything. I'm going to sit here and say Mendelssohn running second. He's not as good as I thought he was, but he's a hell of a lot better than many of you thought he was. I think this is a very encouraging race from him. Now, he got tired at the end of this, but when you factor in his last race had come at the beginning of July, same as Catholic Boy, so that's not a huge excuse for fading as badly as he did, but this genuinely feels like a nice building block or a stepping stone to get to the Breeders' Cup Classic, and it sounds like Aidan O'Brien will just train him up to the Classic, excuse me. I think this is an instance where, is it impossible to think that he moves forward out of this race? No, not at all. The question now becomes, can he move forward enough to not only defeat Catholic Boy, but can he defeat Accelerate? Can he defeat Diversify? Can he defeat any of the other older horses that show up for a race like that? I'm not totally convinced, but we still have some time. At the end of the day, he's a very, very nice horse, and whatever they choose to do with him, again, it sounds like the Classic, he's a nice horse, and I'm just happy as a fan to see him put forth a representative effort. I think this is more what he was as opposed to the Dwyer, as opposed, obviously, to the Kentucky Derby. And you know what? He's not as good as the UAE Derby, but he's a very, very talented horse in his own right. One other horse that I really want to touch on is the third-place finisher, Bravazzo. I thought Bravazzo, to me, outside of the top two, and this sounds like Captain Obvious, I thought he was very clearly the third best horse in this race. He finished third in here, but he was one of the only horses making up any sort of significant ground from the back of the pack. It sounds like Lucas wants to point him to the Pennsylvania Derby on September the 22nd. Lucas's quote after the race, nobody was closing yesterday, or this was on Sunday. Nobody was closing yesterday. He was the only one. It's hard to beat them when they get the dream trip those two got. I kind of look at it and say yes and no. They have the dream trip because they put themselves in that position and no one else did. But I will say with Bravazzo, I was very encouraged by this effort. Again, he came home with the second fastest final quarter, 25:45. And on the far turn, there was a scenario, or for a moment, I thought he was going to run last because Luis Saez is scrubbing on him, and he's just kind of fading to the back of the pack. But then he starts picking it up in between horses, and he finishes very well. I have a funny feeling he's sitting on a career best effort. Don't ask me why. I don't really have any sort of concrete proof of that, other than the fact that I thought this was a very encouraging effort from him. I don't know if he's good enough to win a race like the Pennsylvania Derby, but he just shows up each and every time. He's a very, very honest horse, and it's hard not to root for an honest horse trained by someone like Wayne Lucas. Hard not to root for them. I think he's interesting, and I will, if they do go to the Pennsylvania Derby, I would seriously consider him a major threat in there. And you know what? He would be the kind of horse, if they choose to go to a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic, which we still have a ways to go, I don't think he can win, but he is that kind of horse in a race like that at 40-1. Could he run third or fourth? Absolutely, and perhaps that's the thing that makes your Breeders' Cup weekend, and maybe that makes your entire weekend, or even your entire year. If you hit the trifecta, the superfecta using this horse underneath some of the logical ones, and it comes back a nice price. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, King Zachary, I know a lot of people are impressed with him. I thought he did. He finished well, and again, he came home faster than anyone else in that final quarter mile. I guess the reason I'm not more excited about a horse like that is because he has no early speed whatsoever. So in these dirt races, you're going to need an absolute pace meltdown if he's going to come with it. And Dale Romans even said, he goes, I just don't know why he's so far back early on in those races. If he's coming from last in some of these big spots, I can't trust him as far as a win contender is concerned. Vino Rosso continues to just be a little bit. He runs in spots, and I will not trust him. I said it in the preview edition. I'm saying it now. I won't trust him in any race that he shows up in until he proves that he can put it all together, and maybe he never will. Trigger warning: I want him at shorter distances. Said in the preview that I think he's talented. He didn't have the cleanest of trips in this spot. He was down on the inside, and he had to wait a little bit in between horses. But, again, the distance I don't think is his friend. I think he's a talented horse. I would like to see him going shorter distances. Tenfold, just he wasn't that good. I hate to say it, but, again, I didn't like the Jim Dandy coming into it, and I think that kind of was validated with the way that those horses ran in this spot. We need to discuss the bottom 3 finishers who happen to be the 3 horses on the morning line anyway that were the favorites, and I think rightfully so. Ultimately, Gronkowski, Good Magic, and Wonder Godot. Gronkowski just slow out of the gate again, and then finally once Joel got into him and he kind of wanted to start going, he was kind of keen in and amongst horses. Didn't really work out, and he just had nothing down the lane. Sounds like there's a possibility he runs in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, given his affinity for Belmont Park and some longer distances. Good Magic was wide on the first turn. That doesn't help his cause. But he just never really had any sort of oomph. He never looked like a threat at any point in the race. He's better than this. We know that. But at the same time, you have to wonder, how good is he? I think he's talented, and I think he can obviously win races. But I mean, is he a Breeders' Cup horse? I don't know. He hasn't really done anything to prove to me that at 10 furlongs against the best of the best, and I know he ran second in that Kentucky Derby. Is he really a Breeders' Cup Classic horse? Maybe he's a dirt mile horse. Maybe he's something different. I don't know. You obviously know he's better than this, though. The question now is what is his game? Where does he actually fit? I wouldn't mind to see him in a race like the Pennsylvania Derby. We'll find out. Nothing has come out this far about Good Magic. And Wonder Godot, the last horse we'll talk about. She was in a very good position, and when the real running started, she offered nothing. She had nothing. She's better than this. They took a shot. It was an ambitious move. It didn't pay off. She's a talented horse. I think she fits with the girls. I don't think she fits with the boys. But there's no reason to think that she can't be interesting in other big races this year against her own sex and against more reasonable company. The distaff might be a little bit tough for her, but at the end of the day, if that's ultimately the goal for them, I think it's an interesting spot. And again, you would have to give her consideration if she showed up there. I thought the top 3 all ran very well, but one horse very clearly was the best on Saturday afternoon. Catholic Boy proves that the main track is not a problem for him. He gets the job done in the Grade 1 Travers, 104 Beyer speed figure, 118 time form U.S. rating. Could be prepping for the Breeders' Cup Classic on turf in the Hill Prince, and if not there, possibly the Jockey Club Gold Cup.